Hello everyone. Our topic this week was requested by Hunter Wegspack. We'll be going over Fabius Bile from the Warhammer 40K franchise. Spoilers for Warhammer 40K, I guess?
Okay, so Fabius Bile is, by the time of the games, humanity's premier mad scientist whack job, one of many titles he would take pride in, whilst the vast majority of the Imperium of Man is not so fond of him. He's also incredibly old, having initially served as a space marine way back in the days of the Emperor of Mankind, approximately 10,000 years prior. See our videos on Space Marines and the Emperor respectively for more details on those subjects. Bile was born on Earth to a noble family, which means practically nothing because he was given to the Astartes, or Space Marine program, at a young age. He became a member of the Emperor's Third Legion, later dubbed the Emperor's Children, a fact which would shape the rest of his life. Space Marines are genetically altered super soldiers. To create them, synthetic organs are implanted and/or grown, depending upon the organ, into a person over the course of more than a decade, during which time the subject undergoes the training that will combine with his enhancements and lead to his becoming a Space Marine. These organs are collectively referred to as gene seed. They are the building blocks to start the process and can be harvested from fallen Space Marines and repurposed to create more. A process more important to the Emperor Age Third Legion than any other legion in history.
Shortly before Bile's induction into the ranks of the Third Legion, a crisis struck the entire Legion. While mobile units of any given legion maintain and produce gene seeds as they can, all legions at the time held vast stores of the legion's gene seed on Earth. During a seemingly routine operation, the vast majority of the Third Legion's gene seed, which was being shipped to a different location, vanished. Accounts differ on what happened, but the important thing was that it was gone. While a terrible blow, this would have been manageable were it not for an attack on the gene seed vault of all the various Space Marine legions, which infected and corrupted much of the gene seed in those vaults, which happened around the same time. As the Third Legion had no other banks of gene seed left, this affected them far more than it did the other legions. They could still rebuild, but their growth had been effectively stunted, with the creation of new gene seed having to be based upon their own work and recycling the corpses of their fallen, making it a slow task. What's more, to meet the needs of the Imperium, heavily at war at the time, new Marines were created and inducted using the remainder of the gene seed for the Tainted Vaults, relying upon the hope that most of it was still good and resolving themselves to handle any problems that arose if the Space Marines created from those batches went mad or risked corrupting future gene seed endeavors. Fabius Bile was one of the Marines inducted into the Third Legion using these infected batches of gene seed.
Bile had both a gift and a, perhaps unhealthy, interest in the sciences, and as such eventually became one of the Legion's apothecaries, later rising to Chief Apothecary of the Third Legion. The apothecaries are the Legion's scientists and medics, but their most important duties are the maintenance and retrieval of their Legion's gene seed. To that end, when it was discovered that some among Bile's batch of the Legion had indeed been implanted with infected gene seed, Bile was at some point put in charge of the research project for identifying who was infected and whether or not it could be cured. This was important because while a Space Marine's enhancements normally allow them to live for centuries and even millennia, those who are infected died much more quickly, could be driven mad, and always had their gene seed rendered unusable. As no cure was ever found, meaning most infected gene seed wasn't reusable, and even those seeds that were invariably infected the new host. Bile successfully mapped the entire genetic code of his legion, identifying all infected members, though never finding a cure. It was determined that those infected had to be executed for the long-term survival of the Legion. Resultantly, Bile, who was among the infected, falsified his own records, forcing some other member to die in his place so that his work could continue. Bile secretly used his position to harvest material from his fallen brethren to extend his life for years while he searched for a cure.
Despite these setbacks, the Third Legion valiantly fought on until, by the time their Primarch was discovered, they numbered a mere 200. For comparison, each of the other 20-ish legions numbered in the tens or hundreds of thousands. Years before all of this, the Emperor had created the Primarchs, super soldiers derived from his own genetic template that were as advanced in comparison to the Space Marines as the Space Marines were in comparison to normal humans. In fact, each of the Space Marine Legion's gene seed was genetically based upon the DNA of their respective Primarchs. However, each of the Primarchs had been scattered to the stellar winds by enemies of the Emperor, and thus many were not found until years later, the Third Legion's Primarch included. Their Primarch's discovery was a day of celebration, not just because their de facto leader had been found and reclaimed, but because with his presence, new, taint-free gene seed could be rapidly created. Unfortunately, his DNA provided no cure for Bile, so the scientist continued his own research in secret. Eventually, the Third Legion became one of the traitor legions, corrupted by the Chaos Gods, see our video on them here, and joining a war against the Emperor himself in what would come to be known as the Horus heresy. Horus was the Primarch who led the rebellion. While the Third Legion and their Primarch fell into the sway of the Chaos God Slanesh, Bile himself followed his legion's lead politically, but remained more a student of the cold sciences, with little interest in the Chaos Gods. During these events, he began devolving into true mad scientist territory, but it's unclear whether this transformation was simply Bile revealing his true nature when it was no longer taboo, a slow slide into madness prompted by his tainted gene seed, or some kind of at least partial corruption by the Chaos Gods, or something else entirely, but regardless, he put his darkly brilliant intellect to great use for his legion as they warred with the Emperor, and over time, his experiments grew ever more grim and disturbing.
Bile sought several things: a cure for his disease, and a way to grasp the immortality held by his brethren, the perfection of mankind so that they could rise to greater heights, his name etched into the annals of history, and always more power, more knowledge. He performed many wonders during the Horus heresy. When one of his legion's generals was beheaded, Bile reattached it, returning said general to life. When his Primarch slew one of the other Primarchs, his closest friend and brother, Bile cloned the fallen Primarch multiple times. Each time the Third Legion's Primarch tried to get the fallen Primarch to join them in the fight against the Emperor, and each time the fallen Primarch refused and was slain. This process repeating itself numerous times before Bile's Primarch finally gave up. When the Third Legion's Primarch was seemingly slain and possessed by a demon, Bile was instrumental in the, quote, extreme torture used to exorcise the demon. While resources were at hand, Bile also began learning and researching everything he could about the Emperor's methods, as the Emperor was the greatest scientist the Imperium had ever known. During the final assault on Earth and the Emperor himself, Bile joined his colleagues in the battle, but after capturing numerous civilians, enemy combatants, and acquiring information, even before the tide began to turn, and struck out on his own. Seeing this as a betrayal, the Third Legion's Primarch put a bounty on Bile's head.
Leaving Earth, Bile traveled through the war-torn Imperium in a manner that was, quote, like a shard of glass in an intestinal tract. Ew. He went from planet to planet and from system to system, offering aid, both technical and martial. He did have some loyalist followers with him, in exchange for test subjects, equipment, technical information, lodging, or anything else his potential clients had of interest. In exchange, he provided military, scientific, or medical aid, though his efforts were often so horrific that those who contracted with him were appalled, sometimes regretting the bargain even when all they wanted was to see their enemies destroyed, as Bile's efforts were often either severe or left the planet in ruins somehow. Poisoned atmosphere, population turned into monsters, etc. Like nearly all of the Traitor Legion's members, Bile eventually found his way to the Eye of Terror, an enormous warp, magic, storm/rift that was largely considered too dangerous and chaotic a place to exist, but to which the Traitor Legions, as Chaos God corrupted servants, thronged. Bile first established a base for himself on a ruined planet so that he could continue conducting his experiments, but eventually found himself leading his old legion in the absence of their Primarch. This came to an end quickly, though, when he was able to clone Horus, the Primarch who started the rebellion, after stealing Horus's corpse from Horus's legion. The resultant creature was destroyed by the Traitor Legion's supreme commander, and when the Third Legion stronghold was attacked in retaliation, Bile fled, leaving his fellow soldiers without a care.
Because of his second retreat, while his battle brothers bled and died, along with other heinous acts in the Millennia sense, Bile is, by the modern point of the games, either actively hunted or passively distrusted by nearly every major power in the galaxy. One of the writers for a book series in which Bile featured prominently begged the company behind Warhammer 40K to let Bile be killed off at the end of the series. That is how nasty this guy is. Those people or organizations who do still work with Bile either do so under duress, because they're desperate, or because they don't realize who he is. Groups from the Traitor Legions to various alien races hunt or don't work with him because almost invariably, when Bile deals with you, he comes out on top, and you come out worse for wear, dead, stranded, genetically modified, or worse, and that's if you're on his side.
He has seeded his new men throughout the galaxy. At their best, they are genetically enhanced people with strength, speed, and intellects outmatching those of normal humans, and in many cases meeting or exceeding those of the Space Marines, but with hearts twisted and given to all the worst vices of humanity. At their worst, these new men are monstrous, deformed creatures, little more than ravenous beasts, with physical capabilities sometimes far outmatching those of Space Marines. Despite his wasting illness, which Bile has never cured, despite all of his other successful efforts, Bile lives on through a detailed coupling of neural networks and clones. He has a network of neural interfaces that update regularly, and which can be downloaded into a clone body, or theoretically any human body, though this has not solved his infection problem. This solution for temporary immortality also allows him to have multiple clones running around at once, either giving him multiple capable eyes, hands, and brains on a single project, or letting him oversee multiple endeavors across the galaxy at once.
All is not going well for Bile, though, as while this current solution has its perks, it was engineered because not only is the corrupting influence in his body still present, it's getting worse, with clones slowly remaining viable for less and less time. This hasn't lessened his ambition, though. He's cloned most, if not all, of the Primarchs by this point, though something always happens to them. He's working on cloning the Emperor himself, he continues to seek his own immortality, and in one of his most recent stories, came out on top in a three-way battle between two sects of the Traitor Legion and a group of the Emperor's Guard, where he walked away with a powerful Chaos artifact as well as prime experimentation material in the form of captured Emperor's Guards. Barring a minor miracle in the dark future of Warhammer 40K, Fabius Bile will likely continue to haunt the galaxy for several more years to come.
And that's basically the story of Fabius Bile, Mad Doctor of the Warhammer 40K franchise. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave us a like and share it with someone you know might like it. If you have ideas for videos you'd like to see in the future, do like Hunter Wagspack and let us know in the comments down below. If you'd like to see more of our videos, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And if you'd like to see our Let's Plays, click the link in the description and subscribe to our Let's Play channel.
In the meantime, this has been
True Masters and Morons, signing off.